As I lay in bed, I couldn't help but overhear my husband Kite on the phone in the next room. His words cut through me like a knife. It can't be helped that my wife isn't beautiful, but at the very least, I wanted a pretty daughter who takes after me. Instead, all my wife could give me was a plain-looking son who takes after her. It's truly disappointing, Kite said to the person on the other end of the line. So Kite really did look down on me as a dull and remarkable woman. But who on earth was he talking to? I kept my ear pressed against the bedroom door, listening intently. Kite went on. Oh, by the way, that men's aesthetic salon I mentioned before was great. Even as I get older, I want to take care of my appearance enough to still look cover-worthy. Kite goes to a men's aesthetic salon? I've never heard anything about that before. Ever since hearing that conversation, I felt a heavy atmosphere between Kite and me. It was around that time that I stumbled upon divorce papers with Kite's portion already filled out. I couldn't forgive him. It was my son George who came to my rescue when I felt that way. George encouraged me, saying I shouldn't put up with this any longer and that I should file the divorce papers. You're right. It seems like your dad wants to leave me anyway. So let's give him what he wants and submit them, I said to George. That's more like it, George replied. And with that, George and I began our plan for revenge against Kite. My name is Angie Mello, a 35-year-old housewife from New York City. Ever since I was a child, I've lacked confidence in my appearance and always tried to avoid standing out. Especially during my school days, I would feel envious of the pretty girls with well-proportioned faces in my class, harboring an inferiority complex at times. However, my parents taught me to cherish a compassionate heart towards others. So among my close friends, I think I was always the one they adored for being kind. Even as I entered society as an adult, I let go of my insecurities about my looks and made an effort to be considerate of those around me. Especially at company drinking parties, I would take the initiative to pour drinks and casually strike up conversation with inexperienced new hires. I made it my motto to prioritize others over myself. The one who had been subtly watching over me during that time was my current husband, Kite. Kite was 1 year my senior at the company and worked in the sales department. He had chiseled features that were completely unlike my own. Since we were in different departments, we rarely saw each other on a daily basis, but apparently he paid attention to me every time I attended a drinking party. Angie, you really take such good care of the people around you. I've been noticing it for a while, Kite told me one day. Oh no, I just have a restless nature and can't sit still. When I look around and see something that needs doing, I can't help but want to lend a hand, I replied. Not at all. It takes a truly perceptive person to do what you do. It's not something just anyone can manage. I really admire that about you, Kite said, praised by the handsome Kite, who was popular with the female staff. I was over the moon. Our conversation took off from there and Kite and I naturally grew close. After a year of dating, I married Kite. The following year, our son George was born, and our family of 3 lived happily. However, cracks began to form in our blissful days around 10 years into our marriage. Up until then, Kite rarely had to travel for work. But around that time, Kite's business trips suddenly increased in frequency. When I heard he had another 3-day trip today, I asked him about it. Hey honey, you've been traveling an awful lot lately. That never used to happen before. So what changed? I questioned. Huh? Well, my bosses were considerate of the fact that we had to take care of the young George until now. After all, our company is very understanding about childcare, Kite explained. But George is already in 3rd grade now, and we don't have any younger children. So they've started entrusting me with more work. Is that so? I replied, feeling distrustful of Kite's explanation. I had worked at the same company until we got married, but I'd never heard anything about them being so accommodating of childcare. More than that, I couldn't accept how Kite unilaterally decided to increase his workload without any discussion with me. Perhaps sensing my displeasure, Kite shot back irritably. What's with that reaction? Childcare has settled down for you too, Angie. So why don't you consider returning to work? You're a woman whose only redeeming quality is that you're a busybody. My only redeeming quality? What's that supposed to mean? I asked sharply. No, nothing. I didn't mean anything deep by it, Kite backpedaled. But his words still sat wrong with me. Sure, Kite is handsome, but I'm a decidedly plain-looking woman. Knowing that all too well myself, I couldn't help feeling my anger rise. Maybe deep down, Kite actually looks down on me. Maybe that's why such a sentiment slipped out so thoughtlessly. To me, it sounded like Kite was implying that because I'm not much to look at, that I'm a worthless wife unless I at least get a job. That much was clear. It's not that I dislike working, but the thought of obediently doing what Kite says rubs me the wrong way too. Anyway, our household finances aren't so tight right now, so I'll wait until George is a little older before looking for a job, I told Kite. Oh, is that so? Well, suit yourself then, Kite replied coldly, turning away from me. Perhaps my stubbornness put him off. Not wanting to argue further, I didn't say anything back. And with that, our married life entered a phase where we barely even spoke to each other. Kite became just a person who earns a paycheck. I grew so fed up with living off Kite's income alone that I started working part-time once George was in middle school. But then Kite had this to say about me starting a part-time job. Oh wow, so Angie's finally become a part-time auntie? Suits you perfectly. Excuse me, auntie, you don't need to put it like that, I retorted. Seriously, the rare times he does say something to me, it's never anything good. I'm about to turn 40, but that's still too young to be called an auntie. Wanting to avoid interacting with Kite as much as possible, I quickly finished the housework and hopped in the bath. After my bath, I was just about to enter the bedroom when I heard Kite's voice coming from inside. It seemed he was on the phone with someone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop on the conversation, but what I accidentally overheard left me stunned. It can't be helped that my wife isn't beautiful, but at the very least, I wanted a pretty daughter who takes after me. Instead, all my wife could give me was a plain-looking son who takes after her. It's truly disappointing, Kite said to the person on the other end of the line. So Kite does look down on me as a dull woman after all. But who on earth is he talking to? I kept my ear pressed gently against the bedroom door, listening to the rest. Oh right, that men's aesthetic salon I went to recently was great. I want to take care of my appearance enough to still look cover-worthy even as I get older. What? I'm handsome? Don't say embarrassing things like that, Kite continued. Kite goes to a men's aesthetic salon? I've never heard of that before. Why did he keep it a secret from me? Aesthetic salons cost a fair amount of money. Where is he getting that money from? I couldn't help but wonder. But for now, I pretended not to have heard anything. After Kite finished his phone call, I waited a bit before entering the bedroom as if nothing happened. Kite also acted normal, making small talk under the covers so I wouldn't suspect he'd been on the phone. The atmosphere felt so heavy. Thinking that, I silently slipped under the covers. As I lay in bed, tears began to well up in my eyes. I'm well aware that I pale in comparison to Kite, but knowing what he really thinks of me is just too frustrating to bear. I tried to cry silently so Kite wouldn't realize I was sobbing. And then morning came. Before leaving for work, Kite announced, I'm going on a 3-day business trip starting today, so I won't be back until late night the day after tomorrow. With that, Kite hurriedly left the house. Today happened to be Friday, so late night the day after tomorrow meant Sunday night. I started to doubt if it was really a business trip, but I also thought the timing was just right. because there was something I wanted to investigate while Kite was away. When Kite returned 3 days later, I made a point to observe him closely and noticed he looked a bit different. His skin had a certain glow to it. I see. So that's how it is. While Kite was gone, my investigation had led me to a realization. Oblivious to the fact that his secret had been exposed, Kite brought up his next business trip plans. Kite told me, "Oh, right, I have another week-long overseas business trip next month, starting on the 20th. Oh, okay, got it," I replied, pretending not to know anything. I wondered if he was going for some time-consuming treatment this time, or maybe he'd be away from home for a week for some other reason. As I thought that, I suddenly remembered the person Kite had been talking to on the phone. If I recall correctly, they had called Kite handsome for going to the aesthetic salon. Could it be that person is? And then the day arrived for Kite's overseas business trip. Judging from his luggage, he did indeed seem to be going overseas. His passport was properly prepared too. He was wearing his usual work suit, giving no indication that he was going on a pleasure trip. It may really be a business trip, but I can confirm that when he gets back. I saw Kite off at the door as he left in seemingly high spirits. Now then, there are things I must do before Kite returns. I opened Kite's desktop computer. For someone so perfectionistic, he doesn't even put a lock on the home computer. Perhaps he feels secure since he doesn't take it outside. In any case, it's convenient for me. A week later, Kite returned home. Ah, I'm so exhausted. I already had dinner, so I'm going straight to bed, Kite said. No sooner had he spoken than he entered the bedroom and fell asleep, snoring loudly. He had left his bag in the entryway, so I opened it to tidy up. His change of clothes and such were crammed in haphazardly. Even though Kite keeps his appearance neat, he leaves all the organizing of his belongings entirely to me. This looks like it'll be a hassle to clean up, I muttered to myself as I took out the contents of the bag. Then, from the very bottom, a single paper emerged. Opening it up, I found it was actually divorce papers. What's more, Kite's portion was already filled out. I guess Kite finally got fed up with me, who pales so much in comparison to him. For now, I decided to hold on to the divorce papers without Kite noticing. I too had grown sick and tired of our superficial married life. Plus, I had checked something on the computer and realized Kite had been lying to me quite a bit. What I had actually been checking on Kite's computer was his credit card history. Fortunately, we shared a credit card as a married couple, though I don't use it. But just in case, I had him tell me the ID and password. I was dissatisfied that I couldn't get my own personal credit card, but I never thought sharing one as a couple would come in handy at a time like this. Incidentally, most of the payments were for aesthetic salons. Moreover, the dates he used those services always coincided with the days he went on business trips. There were a lot of suspicious payments for this overseas business trip too. Some charges were in the tens of thousands of dollars, listing brand names I'd never heard of. With all the secrets he's been keeping, there's no way I can forgive Kite. That night, I printed something out from Kite's computer screen. George woke up and called out to me. "Mom, what are you doing?" "The printer noise woke me up," George said. "Oh, I'm sorry, George." I apologized. I tried to hurriedly hide the printed papers, but I wasn't fast enough. George picked up the papers, looking stunned. What the heck is this? Men's aesthetic salon. Whoa, that costs a fortune. Did Dad use this?" he exclaimed. I regretted showing my middle school-aged son something so outrageous. "I'm sorry for showing you something weird, but don't worry, it'll be okay," I reassured him. "This isn't okay at all. Mom, you're out there working part-time and scrimping and saving every day. What on earth is Dad thinking?" George said, more worried about me than I expected. I had thought of George as a child, but at some point, He had grown this mature and reliable without me realizing it. I told George about how Kite had been lying about his business trips to frequent aesthetic salons, and about the divorce papers from earlier. That's why I thought I'd punish your father. I was going to take screenshots of the credit card payment history and confront him with it, I explained to George. That's not enough. I have an even better idea, so leave it to me, George declared. With that, he proposed what to do with the printed papers. And you know what, Mom? I don't think you need to put up with this any longer. If it were me, I'd go with you to file those divorce papers right away, George added, his concern for me leading him to say that much. That gave me the resolve I needed. You're right. It seems like your father wants to leave me anyway. So let's give him what he wants and submit them, I agreed. That's more like it, he cheered. While Kite was still sleeping, George and I packed our things and left the house. We filed the divorce papers as soon as the courthouse opened, then went back to my parents' home. Since George was on winter break, we could relax for a while. If anything, Kite is probably the one struggling after being left alone at home. Well, whatever. The thing is, Kite often can't wake up on his own in the mornings. I bet he was surprised to find no one home when he woke up today. And the house is in an unbelievable state right now. As I thought that, sure enough, Kite called, his voice sounding like a demon's. Where the hell are you two? And what is all this? The whole house is plastered with printouts of my credit card history, and even receipts from the aesthetic salon. Where did you dig this stuff up from? Kite demanded. Well, while organizing my belongings, I had stumbled upon the aesthetic salon receipts you had been hiding. So I made copies of those too and put them up. Of course, this was George's idea. Forget that. Aren't you supposed to be at work? It's already past starting time, isn't it? I asked Kite. Ah, you're right. Damn it. Because you suddenly disappeared. Now I'm late. How are you going to make up for this? Today's the last work day of the year. Kite griped. I wouldn't know anything about that. After all, I'm not your wife anymore, I stated plainly. Huh? Kite still didn't seem to realize the divorce papers were gone. What kind of half-asleep nonsense are you spouting? What do you mean, you're not my wife? He scoffed. Oh, you still haven't noticed? The filled-out divorce papers that were in your bag, I said simply. As soon as I mentioned that, Kite started to panic. I could hear him opening his bag over the phone. You, don't tell me you submitted those divorce papers? He asked, his voice trembling. Why, yes. I filed them for you, just as you wanted. You were dissatisfied with a plain-looking wife like me and wanted to split up, right? Since I couldn't even give birth to a beautiful daughter who looks like you, I said bitingly. I I never said anything like that, Kite protested. You may not have said it directly to me, but you said it to someone on the phone, didn't you? I retorted. Kite was momentarily at a loss for words. You heard that? He managed to say. That's right. And I also heard about you going to aesthetic salons. Seems you've been frequenting them for quite a while. The receipts went back 10 years, I continued. That. That was because I wanted to stay handsome for you, no matter how old I got. Kite scrambled to make a flimsy excuse. Of course it was a lie that it was for my sake. Oh, if it was for my sake, then instead of going yourself, you should have been sending me to the salons. After all, I'm far inferior to you in looks. What will you do if the gap between us widens even more? I asked sarcastically. No, I mean, it's just. Kate seemed to be grasping for another excuse. Anyway, it was naive of you to not even put a lock on your computer. The credit card history wasn't the only thing I saw. There was also Erica on social media, I said pointedly. Ah! Kate cried out in surprise at my words. Erica is the woman Kite had been exchanging messages with on social media. She was probably the person on the other end of that phone call, too. She seems to be in her mid-20s. You were working on improving yourself to be popular with such a young girl, huh? Going to aesthetic salons at your age, my, how lively of you, I mocked. Kite was rendered completely speechless. Saying nothing more to the silent Kite, I brought up the contents of the posts I'd seen on social media. I looked at Erica's account, and it was jam-packed with memories of the fun overseas trip she took with you for that week starting on the 20th. She wrote about how halfway through the trip, you told her you were leaving your wife and even showed her the filled-out divorce papers. I informed him. That's right. During the time Kite had claimed he was on an overseas business trip, he had actually been traveling with Erica. It seemed that those divorce papers were meant to be shown to Erica. With everything exposed to that extent, Kite couldn't utter a word in his defense. I, I was wrong, he stammered. Well, in any case, you need to get to work now, don't you? I said. Ah, that's right, Kite remembered suddenly. He hurriedly hung up the phone. Well, even if he goes to the office, who knows what will happen? I wouldn't have left that much evidence of his wild spending and cheating around the house just to punish him privately. Kite will face the consequences later on. For now, I need to get my own living situation in order. First, I should notify George's school about our change of address. I'm thinking of asking for more hours at my current part-time job. With all the chaos of getting things settled, I decided to ignore any future calls from Kite. Sometime later, I got a flood of incoming calls from Kite. I had a pretty good idea why he was calling. In any case, it had nothing to do with me anymore, so I didn't answer at all. Matters regarding George's child support and compensation for the affair are being handled through a lawyer, so I don't need to be directly involved. However, after a while, Kite showed up at my parents' house. My parents were out and George had gone to club practice. Taking advantage of the fact that I was alone, Kite glared at me with a terrifying expression and yelled, Angie, why are you ignoring my calls? Kite demanded to know. Because I have nothing left to say to you, I replied calmly. You might not, but I do. You sent copies of the credit card history and aesthetic salon receipts to my company, didn't you? He accused. Oh, that? I just wanted to confirm if your business trips were real since the dates you went to the salons always overlap with your supposed trips. With that much money being spent at your destinations, I thought I'd ask if it could be written off as a business expense. I explained innocently. Idiot. There's no way that would count as a business expense. Kite shouted. Well, of course not. The business trips themselves were a lie to begin with, I stated matter-of-factly. Kite let out a surprised ah at my comment. He had been lying about business trips for 3-day stretches to stay at Erica's house when he went to the aesthetic salon. Especially when he got facial treatments, he not only wanted to hide it from me, but also wanted Erica to praise how beautiful he'd become. Such things were detailed in their message exchanges. I had meticulously checked even those kinds of interactions in their messages. Incidentally, I also took screenshots of the message pages and printed them out. Of course, that's because they serve as clear evidence of his affair. Anyway, I have proof of your cheating with Erica, so expect a lawyer to visit you soon. Be sure to properly pay the consolation money for your infidelity and George's child support when that happens, I told Kite. There. There's no way I can pay that kind of money. I got fired from my job because of your unnecessary meddling, Kite protested. Even I was surprised by that. Huh? Why? You may have lied to me, but you didn't do anything to cause trouble for your company, right? I asked, puzzled. Well, you see, the money I used for the salons and overseas trips, it was actually the company's money. I thought I had covered my tracks, but they found out from the amounts I charged, Kite admitted. It seems Kite had been lying to the company, claiming he used the money for transportation and meals when out of the office, getting them to reimburse it as a necessary expense. That's probably why it came to light when I asked about writing it off as a company expense. Naturally, if they found out he had been going to aesthetic salons every time he stepped out, there would be consequences. Apparently, his boss also interrogated him about the branded items he bought on the overseas trip, exposing his affair. In any case, getting fired is your own fault. Don't try to pin the blame on me, I said firmly. Shut up. None of this would have happened if you hadn't stuck your nose in. There's no fixing things with the company now. But you jumped the gun submitting the divorce papers, Angie. So you're going to withdraw them and take me back, Kite demanded. The nerve of him, expecting to get back together after he cheated on me. Why should I? You have Erica, don't you? I asked. At that, Kite's face suddenly darkened. It seems Erica was just playing around with me. She made me buy her a bunch of ridiculously expensive brand name stuff overseas. And then recently she told me she couldn't actually date me after all. He explained bitterly. Oh, I see. So after you spoiled her rotten, she dumped you? I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as I replied. It turns out Kite was nothing more than an old man being used by a younger woman. Dawn, don't laugh. I was seriously shocked. Erica always told me I was so handsome. But right after we broke up, she blocked my calls and emails. And before I knew it, she had blocked me on social media too, Kite said miserably. I had indeed confirmed that he had been blocked on social media. Why? Because I was the one who made Erica do it. The night before leaving the house, while Kite was sleeping, I had sent Erica a message on social media. This is Kite's wife. If you don't leave my husband alone, I will hire a lawyer and sue you for damages. I had threatened her. Perhaps out of fear, Erica blocked Kite's account without even replying. I immediately deleted the message, so Kite never noticed. Unaware of this, Kite looked at me with pleading, slightly teary eyes. Anyway, I've lost my job, my favorite person, everything. Even if we're divorced, I can't pay any alimony or child support now. So please, take me back and stay with me, Kite begged, even going so far as to prostrate himself. Not that I had any intention of reconciling. Just then, George arrived home from club activities. I was at a loss for how to handle the situation alone, so I was relieved to have a reassuring ally appear. George gazed at Kite with sharp eyes. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded. Oh, George. Long time no see. Looks like you've grown a bit, huh? Kite tried to butter George up in an attempt to win him over. But George didn't fall for the flattery, his expression growing even more severe as he yelled back. Shut up. This is no place for someone like you. Mom is working hard to support me, and I'm studying for entrance exams next year while doing club activities. We're all doing our best to live our lives. We don't need a guy like you who just lounges around and plays all day. George shouted. Hey, how can you talk like that to your parent? I was the breadwinner who provided for you. What do you mean, lounging around and playing? I needed that kind of a breather in order to work for the family. You'll understand when you're an adult, Kite argued. You're saying cheating was a breather? Is that what a man who supports his family does? In that case, I don't want to become that kind of adult. If you get it, then get lost, George retorted. As he yelled, he grabbed Kite by the collar. Kite was powerless against George, who had grown taller than him. Eek. Help me. I was wrong, Kite wailed pathetically, completely cowed in his shock. Thanks to George telling him off so bluntly, I felt emboldened to give Kite a piece of my mind, too. That's right. You never got involved in child rearing, so maybe you didn't realize. But George has grown into a far better man than you think. We don't need you anymore. You lost your job? Well then, go hunt for a new one and live on your own, I declared. Getting that off my chest felt refreshing. Kite started blubbering with tears, but I had no sympathy for him. In the end, Kite gave up and slunk away from the scene, shoulders slumped and looking crestfallen. As I smiled, I turned to look at George. "George, thank you for protecting me," I said gratefully. "It's nothing. We're family, after all. From now on, whenever you're in trouble, Mom, I'll always be there to help," George reassured me. I truly feel blessed to have such a wonderful son. Even though I've become a single mother, I couldn't help but feel that with George by my side, I can stay strong. Apparently, Kite had been job hunting afterwards, but was having a hard time finding stable employment. Perhaps because of that, he still persistently calls my or George's cell phone. But this time, I've decided to ignore him permanently. I've asked a lawyer to prohibit Kite from directly approaching our family. Since I no longer have any reason to stay in contact with Kite, George and I changed all our phone numbers and email addresses. When I consulted my parents, they agreed to cancel the landline too. That way, Kite will never be able to reach us again. George told me he heard an interesting story from his friends at school. They said they've been seeing a haggard-looking old man in the park a lot lately. So I went with them to check it out, and boy was I shocked. It was Dad, George recounted. I snuck away and came home without making eye contact. "I'm so glad my friends didn't realize it was my own father," he said in relief. That's right. The perpetually unemployed Kite has apparently been loitering in the park recently. He was probably kicked out of his apartment for not being able to pay rent. George had sneakily taken a picture of Kite's face for me using his phone's silent camera app. From his appearance, there was no trace left of the chiseled features he once had. His hair was a disheveled mess, and his beard had grown out. His cheeks were sunken in, making him look aged, as if he hadn't eaten in days. Kite, who used to look down on plain old me, now he's leading a dreary life himself, likely regretting his past actions. After staying with my parents for a while, I saved up some money and decided to rent an apartment for George and me. George passed the entrance exam for a public high school. Throughout his 3 years there, he worked part-time, saying he didn't want to burden the household finances. He really gave it his all. 10 years have passed since George graduated high school. He's already married and lives close to me. He offered to have me live with them, but I wanted to live alone without worrying about anyone, so I declined. Now I spend my days leisurely in the apartment George and I used to share. George may have taken after my unremarkable looks, but he found a wonderful wife who understands his good nature. They've also been blessed with 2 children and have a happy family. I'm truly overjoyed that George has found happiness. So even though I'm alone now, I've never felt lonely. My son and his wife, considerate of me, often visit with the kids. Getting to see my grandchildren is my greatest joy these days. Just as my parents taught me, I raised George to have a kind heart that cares for others. And now, I continue to wish in my heart that my grandchildren will grow up to be gentle and compassionate as well.